Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes.
In 1967, I was a 16-year-old girl bored crazy with my working class community of Irving, Texas. My family lived in a diversity-free development of post-World War II housing. I was the middle of three daughters, easily overlooked by parents who had just enough resources to cover the demands of my sisters. As I observed the adults around me, I was largely uninspired. It was as if Irving was isolated from the big issues of the day, such as civil rights and the counterculture. My mother and her friends were more engaged in monthly bingo parties and mayonnaise cake recipes than they were in the women's rights movement. My father never spoke to me directly unless to scold me. I did naturally gravitate towards the little cliques of other girls formed. My naivety pegged me as the least groovy girl in the neighborhood. Kids laughed at me when I made innocent remarks such as, "Oh, look, a Grand Prix," referring actually to a Grand Prix. College would have connected me with the bigger world. I had the grades for it too. However, no one in my family had aspired to higher education, and they only ignored me when I brought it up. As I figured, as an aircraft mechanic and a home seamstress, my parents just couldn't afford it, so I dropped the conversation. Then I met Johnny, a good-looking kid who smelled of sunshine. Johnny ran his fingers through his hair, and it would fall into place perfectly every time. Johnny rode a motorcycle and could go anywhere he wanted, but he chose to be at my side, walking me to classes like I was sacred. Johnny gave me an identity at long last: girlfriend. I channeled my deep longing for excitement into yearning for this boy. The very thought of Johnny threatened my virginity. Yep. When we were finally alone on his twin bed after months of dating, he approached me cautiously. It was me that latched onto him with a driving force I had never experienced. Johnny and I became the solid couple in high school. I was more visible as half a couple than I had ever been alone. My mother questioned the seriousness of our relationship, but during this time, she was bedridden with a risky pregnancy. With my older sister married and my father working nights, it fell on me to wash, cook, clean, and look after my little sister after school. Johnny came over regularly to help. We often fantasized about this unborn child being like our very own. 4 days after her birth, my baby sister died. Her death devastated me. I was angry. I never got to hold her. Johnny was the only person I allowed close to me in my devastation. A year after I met Johnny, I became pregnant. Dear God, I was 16 and had not yet learned anything about the world beyond Irving. But it seemed predestined when Johnny took my hand. "It's okay, Janie. We have each other." News of the pregnancy stunned my parents. They suggested I go to Colorado for one of the new safe abortions, or to the Edna Gladney home to live amongst other wayward girls until my child was born and given up for adoption. I refused both alternatives. In the past year, Johnny and I had been on a mind-blowing adventure of real pathos and ecstasy, with every emptiness within me filled. I could never go back to life without Jimmy. On a drippy Saturday, we were married by a justice of the peace wearing a hat covered in fishing lures. Yeah. Instead of a white wedding gown, I wore a handmade navy blue polyester suit. We moved into a $75 per month apartment. Johnny dropped out of school, and worked at a garage and an ice plant to pay the obstetrician bills. The school district did not allow pregnant girls, so I stayed home, learned to chicken fry Spam, and supplemented funds by taking in ironing. Johnny would pull me into his lap after working all day. We'd laugh as I fed him the lemon meringue pie I made with his mother's recipe. We were happy exploring our new roles. Then, during my last trimester, the pressure of being a boy with a man's responsibilities became too much for Johnny. He became violent, first with a shove, then with a punch. I was shattered more emotionally than physically and unsure of how to handle the situation. One night, Johnny was leaving for a weekend party with friends I'd never met. I demanded he leave some money for food and tell me when he would be back. Our mutual indignation escalated. This time, he smacked me hard, belly first, against a door jamb, and I was left crumpled on the floor, wondering if my baby survived. There was still no movement in the womb the next morning, so I waddled over 2 miles to the doctor's office, rehearsing a lie about tripping on a curb. He checked my abdomen without questioning my story and told me the baby was fine. If he had shown any interest in my condition, I surely would have broken down in tears, relieved to let loose my secret of abuse. But his smug attitude left me humiliated. Deciding that most people would have the same reaction, I remained silent. Johnny was rarely home anymore. While I felt safest in his absence, I nonetheless hated being without money, without transportation, or comfort from my family that only seemed saddened by me. I had no remaining connection with old friends whose lives were filled with bright futures. The thought of phoning the young priest who gave me private catechism classes the year before was too embarrassing. Because I had so adamantly chosen this difficult path for myself, it was just too damned hard to choke down my pride and cry out for help. As the weeks go by, my single joy is the baby inside of me. When Jennifer was born on a cold November night, I found it impossible to imagine Mother Mary herself experiencing such holiness. For a few months, Johnny and I were good together. I never saw the writing on the wall when his discontent began to grow again. He wanted out. When he hit me the first time after Jennifer was born, I stood up to him. I would never again endure the disrespect of a raised hand, and neither would my daughter. I fought back while being slammed, punched, and thrust hard onto that damn linoleum floor. And so it went from one room to the next until a tender cry from the little porta-crib. Johnny turned and walked out the door. We would not be there when he returned. Despite Johnny's pleas and the ache inside of me, all illusions of our love had died. I returned to my high school and, by taking summer courses, graduated with my class. But I moved like a specter among old classmates. Our lives were so different they were unable to even acknowledge me. My absence at prom and graduation ceremonies went unnoticed. I stayed on at my parents' house for a couple of years, paying them a bit of rent and supporting myself and Jennifer with multiple part-time jobs. Each day I feared the thought of roots sprouting, binding us forever to this mundane life I had so wished to avoid. My impulse was to rush away from Irving and towards my future, but it would have been irresponsible to take Jennifer on a risky journey. Leaving her was never an option. Eventually, we did move on. It was a long, circuitous route, but it led to 2 advanced degrees, many professional and personal successes, 3 amazing daughters, and a husband who delights in bringing me joy every day. Along the way, I learned that no place, no person, no circumstance could ever contain me. Ironically, my life turned out to be the great adventure I always wanted.